welcome to the DevReady podcast, where we're helping non-techs build great tech. Today I'm joined by Daniel from Skill Society. He's a co-founder. They're helping in the HR space, bringing AI to the fore and how we use that to really understand soft skills around people, potentially asking questions up front so you don't have to go through that rigor, not just looking at a resume. I find that quite interesting because a lot of technology is all about resume understanding. That's what I've seen in the space. This is probably a step further just to help on the journey of hiring that he's had in the past in terms of startups that he's been involved with. Daniel, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate your time today as well.
No, you're welcome, mate. And civil society is quite new and raw. Love to dig into a bit of your background because it's really product focused. And today, just sharing about what product development really looks like from the ground up. And tell me a bit about you, Daniel.
Yeah, but a bit about me. My background is in kind of UX design back in the early days, and I got really interested in design and product management and bringing products to market. I kind of surrounded myself with some entrepreneurs from an early age and did a lot of consulting gigs where I'd be working for somebody else and they'd bring a product to market and I'd be like, how the hell did they do that? And this sometimes it was software, sometimes it was a service, sometimes it was a physical, products as well, which is amazing to see. And from there, I kind of got a taste for product management. I've worked across agencies, in-house. I've worked for myself, and now I'm at that point where I'm starting my own business and trying to break into the market with the problems that I've seen throughout my career in terms of hiring and identifying top quality talent. As a product manager and as a designer from a background, and my co-founder from an engineering standpoint, how we screen and qualify candidates that fit our kind of attitude and skills that we're looking for to grow our teams. So that's where Skill Society was born.
No, brilliant. Tell me a bit about you mentioned you're drawn to UX, UI design. What excited you about that space? What drew you to that space in the beginning?
I think it's creativity and problem solving, to put in a nutshell. And I think it's, I like the idea of optimization or, the creation of, there's a problem, there's a pain point. How can we as a business or as I as an individual help solve that and, alleviate some of the customer journey, whatever the product is. It could be, purchasing through an e-commerce website. It could be buying a credit report. It could be, hiring top talent in this example. Or, back in the day, it was around, looking towards a membership and governance opportunities across some products that we built in England as well.
It's a fascinating space, the whole UX UI, because there's no perfect one answer.
No.
It's subjective, right? So whatever people see, feel, touch, it becomes a little bit difficult. Especially, I think you mentioned off channel, you're doing a bit in the agency space, where it can be quite subjective. I found that there's quite a bit of a challenge when you're working with people and evolving and different stakeholders when you're working in that space. How do you
Yeah.
sort of hold the line in that sort of world and just make it work for everyone, which is not really possible, but what's the sort of steps that you might think about there?
Yeah, it's very different. I think coming from an agency space, it's around, it's still business objectives and what the target is and things like that. I think the difference for me it was around agency world is very short term. Agencies win work. We're bringing a product to market. We're selling a service, or we're marketing a product in go to market, and then we might not be the agency again in a few years or within the next
It
six
can
months. So
change and
it
evolve,
can
right?
change. So it's usually around project based delivery, whereas in house it's around a continuous strategy. Like what are we trying to achieve in 1 year? What are we trying to achieve in the next 3 to 5 years? And what's our big, hairy, audacious goal, long term objective? Um, Makes sense.
Yeah, it does. In terms of that it's a bit longer term picture when you're sort of
Yeah.
in the business, so it just changes the dynamic a lot. You've been involved in some successful startups along the journey. Probably learnt a lot. The Creditor Watch experience were there for almost 10 years. Tell me a bit about that because you're an early starter in that space, and you mentioned it grew to a couple of hundred people. What was it like? The dynamic of the business as it changed from that little seed concept business to something that's really thriving in the marketplace?
Yeah, I mean, when I joined Credit to Watch, it was a startup. There was good product market fit, but it needed some optimization. They had existing products for different segments of the market. And it was very fragmented in terms of one product to serve one market, another product to serve a different market, and these products wouldn't speak to each other and they wouldn't be in the same ecosystem. Whereas, I think when I came in, when I took a different lens on it and had a look at it, they were all in the same space. They're just at different journeys of where you are, and the customer is in that market. If you're an SME, or if you're in a corporate customer, or you're an enterprise customer, you use these products differently across different customer segments that we were targeting. Where we were going in terms of early days is around looking at user experience. I think I can probably bring that journey of CreditWatch into three chunks, and people often say it's quite a long time to be at one company, and it is. But the way I see it, it's three different companies. So when I joined, it was very much a startup. It was around solidifying product market fit, right? Nailing down who are our customers, what products and services that they need, and how we optimize that for profitability and improve cash flow, so then we can scale the business. There was a growth phase where once we did those experiments and early quick wins and more tactical kind of decisions, we could look at, well, strategically, where do we need to be, and how do we grow to grow the business and grow our customer base and grow our revenue. And then we had an exit around 2017, and then post that it was around, well, how do we scale this up? How do we start bolstering and adding additional roles around the business to then provide a lot more scalability to each specific segment. So we're going from startup generalists, wearing many hats, to scale up specialists, single focus, laser focused on, we need to do this. This is how we're going to do this. How we're going to achieve our long-term vision, and then responsibility kind of setting out throughout the business to make sure we've got the right people in the right places to grow that business.
It's definitely an interesting dynamic, and sometimes people in a startup are not the right people in a growth or a scalable type business.
100%.
What did you find during it? How did the founders go through the transition? Did people change, come and go? What was that like? Because being there would be a great experience for someone that's now a founder, because you've seen what the steps are. You actually understand what the path could look like if you successfully hit that sort of startup product market fit correctly, and crack into growth. Tell me a bit about that whole transition, because it would be significant.
Oh yeah, 100%. And I was reflecting on this around, I think, about 12 months ago as well, and just looking at where we've come on the journey as a company and as myself as an individual. And what I took away from that is, in the early startup days, to be successful, you hit the nail on the head. You have to have a very different attitude, a different mindset. Your appetite for risk has got to be a lot higher. You've got to be comfortable with ambiguity as well, and not necessarily knowing how the day is going to pan out and what you need to do for that day, and being accepting when the day changes and you need to change direction.
It's a great point, like comfortable with ambiguity, because I think that's everywhere in the world of just early business. There's no consistency and there's no real structure to it. It could be like a madhouse sometimes, you get pulled in many different directions. So I agree.
100%. And then it's also coming back to like, well, what are we trying to achieve here, and what target what KPI we're trying to move, and what needle do we need to move as well to get to where we need to be? Is this taking us off track, or is this bringing us back on track as well? So you need to kind of check in with yourself and the team as well to make sure we're all heading in the right direction. So startup is messy, scrappy, not for everyone. And then the scale up side was more structured. I want to know exactly what I'm what I need to deliver, what my responsibilities are, what my KPIs are, yada yada yada. And one of the problems we found throughout those years was around identifying the right person for the right fit. So like I said, those early founders deal with ambiguity. In reflection, a lot of people were very entrepreneurial types themselves in terms of ideas and creativity, and really good at bouncing ideas off one another in terms of, we could do this, we could do this, we could bring this to market. What about if we test this idea with customers? Whereas, if you look at the scale up side, it's around, well, here's, we've got an idea and a business case that we think we might need to bring to market. How do we test that? And then do we run an A/B test? Do we have, one-on-one qualitative conversations, or do we do some sort of quantitative research as well, to gather the feedback there? And early days, you don't have that research. You've got to figure out,
You're
well,
just
what
acting on a
research,
whim, having
yeah,
conversations, and
yeah,
yeah,
what
it's a
tactics
bit
do
of
we
a pluck
need?
in the air
And here, very
sometimes. Yeah,
different. Yeah, yeah, oh
yeah,
yeah. And
correct.
some of that is it's kind of a gut feel on the lower end versus the scale up side. You probably have a gut feel, but you need validation as well. In terms of just as the early days is, if you have a gut feel and it's wrong, it's going to cost the business a lot in terms of, if you lose a lot of money in terms of, cash flow and runway for the team, then that might suffocate the business. Versus in a scale up is around, well, cost control and how would you scale that, and what's the ROI based on this initiative as well. And the answers are never clear on either end, but you know, growing through different businesses, I think going through the different stages, entrepreneurial type people at the beginning, in the middle is a mix of everybody, which is like a really nice harmony in terms of scale up and specialists and generalists and people, multifaceted in terms of skills. And then now it's a different beast where it's around, all right, cool. We need to scale the business to the next level, 10 times what we've got today. And the tools and processes we used yesterday are not fit for today or going to be different than tomorrow as well. So it's around constantly changing and adapting processes and ways of working as well.
So across that journey from startup growth and that scale, from a product perspective, what's the difference? So if we're in startup, we're obviously huge iteration. We can change quickly. We're evolving. We're testing. We're probably testing different customers, different target markets, different messaging, different positioning, trying different feature sets. At scale, we're probably a bit more comfortable. We've got a product that's working with customers. We can be a bit slower in our decision making process. When we're sort of in that sort of period, how do you describe the product management? Because if it would feel it'd be very different in all facets of the business.
In Yeah, I think in the early days it's around we because the capacity was a lot lower. So in terms of what we could deliver as a product team, design team, and engineering team was a lot less because we had less headcount in terms of, and we were going from, all right, cool. Today we need to focus on bringing this new product to market for mercantile agents, and then tomorrow we got to do something else. And we would always be pivoting, and our focus would change, and then slowly we'd need to look at the strategy in terms of, well, what's the tactical changes we need to do today, but then what strategic, you know, initiatives that we need to have to make sure we're on this path of, we want where we want to be in 1 year or 3 years time. That was very much those days, and product management now in terms
You
of
mentioned
Credit
something
Watch.
very important that people maybe
Which
don't
one?
understand. Pivoting. You're
Pivoting. Oh yeah,
always
changing.
pivoting in the early days. It's always changing. So when you're running an early product, your customer might change, your target market might change, your direction
Mm,
could change, the well you're selling it could change, your business model will evolve. Every component's changing. That's going to impact product significantly. That's one of the biggest things I find in early stage startup where founders can be, especially when we go non-technical, who we mostly talk to, I can get a bit of lost in of, I'm just going to build this. But the reality is a customer conversation or a bit of feedback will just completely change the direction in some capacity. Even business model. We're going to sell it for $100 a month, where that's not relevant to your market. Maybe it's a project based licensing agreement. Maybe it's a once-off licensing fee with service, and it just continually evolves. I find that's one of the things that people need to be really aware of when they're breaking into this space.
yeah, 100%. I think something to kind of reflect on was, in the early days, you need to get runs on the board. You need to bring customers
Yeah.
in. Some of those customers are going to be require some sort of customization for a specific workflow that they have, but
Yes.
in terms of product management processes, like that's not scalable. You then become a service
You're a
business,
service-based business if you
service based
correct.
business versus
Yeah.
a product based business or a customer led business. And I think as long as you're sticking towards moving towards that, well, we need the profit, we need the cash, we need the customers, we need the brand labels, we need the data. We need to make sure, well, how can we productize this for not just this one customer, but this group of this
Many.
segment or this many customers in this segment as well, and then moving towards shifting that entire focus away from that and kind of refining the product over time. So I think where Credit Watch started was we had around 8 products maybe at the time, like 8 core products. But if you counted them all individually, it's around 53 different initiatives and products that were brought to these different segments.
Wow.
What needs to happen is that needs to kind of come down, and we need to solidify, well, what products are for what segment and what's moving the needle. And because we have so many, we actually need to drop some products in terms of, what's the uptake on this? Let's look back and reflect on this. Is it bringing in revenue? Is it bringing in data? Is it a part of our long-term strategy? Should we just cut it? Because then it's more resources to focus on our core kind of capabilities versus trying to, just be a feature factory per se.
Yeah, having 53 type of variations of products would be significant. Where did you get to? Was it like in reality it's 80-20 rule in most businesses. There's 20% of those streams would be generating 80% of your growth, your profitability, your revenue. Is that what you found when you're in the space and it just started distilling and solidifying?
Yeah, it was a bit higher than that, but that's a
Okay.
good ballpark to work off. I think our core market was mid market, corporate market. Where
Yep.
if you look at Credit Watch's segmentation, it was like SMEs on one end where they might not have any processes, they may have some processes, they might not know anything about due diligence or credit
Yep.
management. In the middle, it was around bringing in new processes and restructuring existing processes they would have, and then on the enterprise level, it would be, well, now we have this capability and we have the people in house. How do we build it out ourselves? So it's this cliff of, in that mid market segment and corporate segment, we that was the sweet spot for Credit to Watch, where and they still have a lot of runway in terms of there's a lot of new business to bureaus, as well as the market's growing and the size of the market's growing. Um, so it's around how do we bring products for that market segment, but also provide an SME runway in terms of what products what learnings can we take from this mid market to then bring to the smaller guys that need the guidance and need those basic level of checks versus, well, what data and what information can we collect from these markets to then feed to those, API enterprise level customers where they're not using an interface, they're looking for data, they're looking for partnerships, initiatives over multiple years and things like that. So the strategy
That's
was very different. It's
interesting.
around,
Yeah.
yeah, it's around, here's in the middle, this is our cash revenue generating market. We need to bring new products to market to get data for the SMEs and grow, which is very unique to Credit to Watch. And then
Yeah.
that long-term growth and revenue from enterprise style
Enterprise
customers.
was the main. To take it back to the first day you walked in there into Creditor Watch, what was the vision? Was it enterprise? Was it SME? Was it mid? And that would have evolved over time. But what was the
Yeah.
initial? Because just to paint a picture of how things change in a business. Yeah.
I think so. The business started from pitching as a product for SMEs.
Okay. Yep.
In terms of when I started, they really got a lot of runs on the board and a lot of customer growth in that mid market. And then I think they identified early that was the sweet spot, but still had a self serve option for those SMEs. So at that time, it was around, well, um, how do we optimize this SME funnel and bring more people into that top of the funnel process and make sure are we is the SEO on the website correct? Things like that. Simple things where we could double the traffic coming through and the signups quite easily if the SEO was fixed. And that was one initiative. And then moving through that value chain where to understand, like, where's the customer coming in? How do they sign up? What does that funnel look like? How do we activate them? What does that long-term journey look like? And what's the lifetime value of that customer? And where are people churning to kind of fix and plug the holes for the SME segment? Meanwhile, just developing a bit more mature products for that mid-market segment. And that's where when I came on board, that's was very much the initiative. It was around UX optimization of existing self-serve processes and also new development of existing for the mid-market segment. The enterprise at that point was quite low touch. It was let's have the conversations, but I think it was still too early in those days to kind of expect to win a Coca-Cola or a bank or something like
Yeah,
that. The
yeah, the
obviously
early
the
days.
goal was there. The goal was there to kind of the strategy and the vision, to answer your question, was to conquer the SME market because it was a very underserviced market in terms of bureaus in Australia. They were very focused on the high end, your telcos, utilities, banks, very much that side. So obviously they had a lot of the data and a lot of the revenue and a lot of customers, but it was very underserviced on the SME side and that mid market side as well.
Yeah, it's fascinating just to talk through the transition being involved in a startup. Let's go to Skill Society because that's back into startup mode for you.
Oh,
So that's in
100%.
that early stage. Takes the learning of what you've had in the space. You mentioned Credit Watch. It was a bit of a challenge getting the right people in the right seats. You mentioned off, I think it was offline that it took you out of product focus where you were interviewing maybe the wrong people that were brought to the table. What's the vision that you started off with Skill Society? It's about 8 months in. Where did it all stem from, and how did it all come about? To yes, we're in this, we're moving. We've got a co-founder, Alberto's joined you. How does that come about for you?
Yeah, so I think that this is a problem we've had for since my almost day one at Credit to Watch, where we were growing as a business, we were scaling, and one thing we'd always find was we'd always struggle to find the right people and the right people that have the right attitudes for that right stage of the business. I think we talked about this before. You hit the nail on the head. The people we need at the startup versus a growth stage versus a scale stage. There's very different attitudes and very different skills and experience required. And in the early days, reflecting on how this idea came up, when we started building the teams out and started looking for expansion and looking for candidates, I would be doing resume screening one by one, and it was just laborious. It was tedious. It was the worst thing in the world, and I really got an appreciation for systems and recruiters and just outsourcing
And what
because
they
that literally
what
took
they
over
do,
my
because
life. Yeah,
people think we pay a recruiter a lot, but there's a lot of effort just to get there. Still, it down to three top candidates that
it was
potentially could be hired. It's
it was
not an easy
it,
process.
it was a full time job, and I
Yeah.
mentioned this to the CTO at the time, Dale Hurley, and I was like, this is a full time job. We need somebody else to do this. I'm not the best
Yeah.
person for this, and obviously
Classic.
that's manual. It's highly error prone. It's very subjective when I'm going for resumes one by one, and so then we looked at, well, how do we scale this? So then we looked at external resources, recruiters, but something we always struggled with as a hiring managers was to really understand the nuances of the business and what we're trying to look for. When I can have a conversation saying I'm looking for somebody who's uh, deals with ambiguity, has really good attitude, wants to work in a startup, can deal with changing, pivoting ideas in different directions, um, where it's less concrete what you're going to be doing day to day, but here's the guardrails, run with it. Versus at that higher level, it's around, well, this is exactly who we need, and this is where I need you to go in the scale up stage, and this is the position and the portfolio and the product that you're looking after, and this is the segment. It's very different. Where you've almost given them 95% of the answer, and it's
Yeah,
just like, run
there's
with
no
it.
questions, right? Run with it,
Yeah,
just move with it.
yeah, yeah.
It's very different.
And a few years ago, I came up with the idea. There's definitely something we can do in this space when it comes to helping recruiters or internal talent teams or hiring teams themselves understand how to identify a good candidate from a bad one, or how do we gauge that? Because it's very subjective at the moment. And when I started looking at the processes when we started Skill Society, it was around, as a hiring manager, the problems I have is around finding the right person. Flip that onto its head and look at from a candidate experience. A lot of candidates don't really get any conversation, any answers. You don't
Little
really
feedback, right? You hear that
little
all the time.
feedback. You,
Yeah,
you
don't
shoot
get
off
much
your
of it.
resume to apply on LinkedIn or Seek or Indeed and products like that, and it's just a hidden hope. And if you get an automated response, well, at least it's something.
Something.
It should be given some sort of indication.
It
I
doesn't
think
help the person at the other end in terms of
no,
how they. Yeah, the feedback is input. Like everyone needs feedback. We require that as human beings to know what's working, what's not. When you're not getting it, it's difficult, isn't it?
yeah, and it's demoralizing as well. And if you're applying for say 20 jobs in a day, and you've done a week's worth of that or a month's worth of that, and you've got three automated emails, you feel a bit down and a bit destroyed as a human.
You would.
Trying to quite
Yeah.
questioning
I'm
whether
I'm a fortunate one. I've never been through that. I've always worked for myself. So 16 years, run
ah
my own businesses. So never been through that process. So yeah, fortunate not to have. But yeah, I can get. It wouldn't be very fun just going through the unknown all the time.
yeah. So I think so looking at both sides of that, and really terrible candidate experience. The
Yeah.
products we started looking at, like in terms of what's wrong with these systems. Is it a system, or is it a product standpoint, or is it a communication standpoint, or is it an education, or a training view that we need to change. That's where Skill Society was started, with the ideas like, well, how do we change this industry? How do we change internal teams to hire and identify talent better? How do they work with recruiters, and convey those nuances to an external person that doesn't really understand the culture and the objective or the tech stack or the strategy, and
They're very
you know
difficult, isn't it? So
yeah
it's looks like when we bring in any type of consultant, they don't really. It's surface level,
yeah
and to really get deep into an organisation, you really have to go in and really understand it, and pick it apart. But from a HR hiring perspective, that's near on impossible. Maybe they focus on a particular space. How do they
yeah
do it? So yeah,
yeah
difficult one.
at the moment. Yeah, it's very to begin with. I think the ratio is so out of whack for like hiring teams and HR and PNC and talent acquisition and external recruiters, where you don't have time. That's the problem. Time is of the essence. So that's one problem we wanted to solve with, and that's where when we came to this problem space, it was around, well, we as humans can do something and we can do training, but then that's the problem. There is around, we're not scalable, and myself and Albert are very very much product people. So a couple of months ago, that's where we ended up launching our AI screening assessments, where we can kind of automate and qualify candidates automatically, ensure every candidate's measured objectively and consistently across that top of the funnel, where we can buy a lot of time back for hiring teams, talent acquisition specialists, HR managers,
For
that
everyone
have that
listening,
function.
what does screening mean? What does just distill
Yeah.
that down to what does it actually mean in what you're delivering for your
Yeah,
clients?
so typical processes of the current status quo is you apply for a role, your resume will get ingested into a system called an ATS system, an applicant tracking system. From the It'll pass your resume, and then whoever's on the other end will search for keywords in their database and the applicant pool, based on I'm looking for somebody in fintech, so they'll search fintech and they'll write product manager or senior product manager or head of product, and then they'll look for parameter of how many years you've looked there, and they'll look for basically keyword research off the back of a resume. So problem there is, if you write a resume, if you're terrible at writing resumes, you're not even going to
Yeah,
get in
you're
that
gonna have
short
trouble.
list.
Yeah,
You're
that
not
is a
even going to get in the
challenge.
list. It's for everybody. It's a bit different. Product managers should be good at writing resumes. Everyone should be, but designers, it's a bit harder to articulate what the ROI was, but it's still feasible. And then developers as well, they're very much technical, so they're just like, this is what I've done.
Yeah,
So it's around
it's real.
selling
It's
yourself.
your
It's a
point.
very different skill required. And when it comes to screening, so what the process would be, you'd go into that funnel in terms of a shortlist based on those keywords, and then an internal, the internal hiring team, whoever that is, whether it's HR, the hiring manager themselves, or a talent acquisition specialist, or a recruiter, would then look at those resumes one at a time, and that's when you'd get eyeballs on your resume, you'd screen, and there'd be a ranking associated based on the keywords coming through for a specific role, and then they would choose at that point who they'd want to call for a screening call, and that screening call would be anywhere between 15 to 20 minute kind of conversation, just to understand a bit more about the nuances beyond that, and ask them some questions about the resume, ask some questions around why they're applying for this, or you could even lean in towards just a rough idea of behavioral style questions to understand where the thought level is as well. And more importantly than anything, I think it's around understanding communication skills at that first screening call. So that's what a screening assessment would be in terms of a traditional approach. Where we are coming into it, where Skill Society is coming into it, is that we're taking that structured, here's the 5-10 questions that I ask almost every candidate. We're basically putting that into an automated process where we have an LLM run a conversation over the phone or online, and it's a flowing conversation that's back and forward, and we ask these questions based on whatever the hiring team's qualifiers are and what questions they have. And off the back of that, we're basically doing sentiment analysis to then understand, well, how does this person rank in terms of what that hiring team's looking for. So each business and each company will have their own qualification of what makes an excellent candidate, what makes an okay candidate, and what makes a candidate that doesn't really hit the mark. So we can help build qualification up front. So then we run these on-demand AI interviews that candidates can trigger themselves, and basically we just screen all the candidates at current status quo is we're screening everybody automatically. So then we're collecting data and understanding those soft skills, those attitudes, how they're ranking based on the criteria that that role is looking for and that company is looking for, rather than a keyword research that someone subjectively jumped in and tried to find as well. So if you spell something wrong, you're also not in that list. So if you're
Yeah,
not
it's
good at
fascinating.
spelling, yeah,
At scale, though, could we go beyond the resume and bring the screening further up the chain? Is there another model that we could actually look at? Obviously, there's a cost to running LLMs and these types of calls, but
yeah.
everyone's starting to see the power of this technology and what might be possible. Uh, to avoid people getting left behind and maybe missing the right candidate because maybe they don't know how to write a resume, which is an interesting dynamic when that's not the role at all that they're walking into.
Mm.
Is there a way to maybe step it up a level and say, let's screen the 200 people, given that it's all automated? Is that some thinking, or is it really just let's stick to the current process? How do we,
That's the thinking we're going down as
yeah,
well. And a lot
okay.
of conversations we're having at the moment is around, well, if I've got 500 of people applying for a role, I don't want to spend 500
Yeah.
times assessments to screen all these people. So
Yes.
how we're running it at the moment is we're basically capturing questions that are qualifiers. So a good example would be if you're a remote first company and your questions are around, can you work over 6 hours overlapping Australian business hours? What's your salary? There's a band there. Where are you working from as well, just to give some indication of, what country you're working from if it's a remote first role. Is the questions like that we can automatically qualify you out of an interview
Yeah,
and,
makes sense.
qualify you into like, well, you should be
In
doing an
around.
interview. Have you had the experience as a product manager? How many years experience have you had? Just simple questions where if we can get that up front, the way our service works is that we basically screen everybody. We're leaning towards, you need to really look at the wider
Yeah.
pool here rather than trying to look at your traditional,
Yeah.
here's how I'm going to shortlist it, and then can you screen these 8 people? That's not really going to work, and it defeats the
And
purpose.
that's the power of technology, right?
Yeah.
We've got this technology and there's access to scale now. So we copying. I think people get stuck in just copying the manual process and then putting technology behind it. Where
Mm.
sometimes you've got to throw the process out and just think about how can we evolve the process or drastically change it in a way where we get better outcomes. Maybe we're not getting the right people, like you said, because we're not screening the right people because maybe they don't know how to write a resume. So it's fascinating. So yeah, we need to really evolve process with technology as it really stems in front of us. It will change.
Yeah.
Every process is changing and evolving. That's the opportunity we all have within the confines of any technology space, any specific market we're in right now.
Mm. And to kind of touch back on, when you talked about going back to the top of the funnel, that's the space that we're playing in. We're not looking at the resume at all in our process. We're not looking at the
Yeah, nice.
resume
That's changing it.
with a bias, and we're not trying to replace an existing bias process with another bias automation process. So we're trying to make it more objective. So it gives a
Okay.
more consistent view of how do we assess candidates at scale, and making sure every candidate's assessed in the same way. Me as a human, if I call you in the morning versus 4 p.m., I'm going to be very different in the morning versus I've done 20
Of
calls
course.
today and I'm over speaking to people. But that's just me as an
So
introvert.
true.
So so we're looking at what data we can collect and what information's relevant beyond the resume, so we can assess them from a human. This almost replacing what me and Alberto was trying to do in an interview is like look at the human side of it and the skills and the attitude and what do you want to achieve and where do you see yourself in a few years, like what are your goals, what are your aspirations, rather than here's what I've done in the past,
Yeah.
can we use that as validation what I'm going to do in the future? I mean, it is,
Possibly, maybe,
it's
maybe not.
possible,
Yeah.
but it's also for us, it's around assessing that attitude and understanding whether you fit for this role, but then also qualifying and making sure you can do the role you've applied for. Don't get me wrong, that's still required, but
Oh, we need the skills, right? So the skills
yeah,
are a must. They need to be there, but there's more than just doing the role these days. I feel like there's a lot more to being in a business. There's that. How do we connect as team, as people, can we go above and beyond? The ambiguity
Mm,
side comes in, especially early stage. Can you
mm,
work in the unknown? Because it can never change, evolve. Every business is different, but yeah, we need
yeah.
to really assess on two fronts. Not just in my mind, a resume tells you only so much. I've
Mm,
hired off a resume many times, and they're completely the wrong people. Even though the resume said perfect, these guys they hit the mark. They've done everything before. They've proven it, but completely wrong people. Then you get people that have maybe not as good of a resume, but they come in great attitude, and they come in and just try anything, be a part of a team, and get things done. And just depends what you're hiring for, but yeah,
yeah.
everyone's different and what you're looking for. So it's
Yeah.
a resume doesn't tell. It's only one part of the puzzle. It's not
Ah,
everything.
and it's a
So
guess as well. Like,
yeah,
if a company will have an idea, and me as a hiring manager, will be like, I know exactly who I need to sit in this seat. Versus
yes,
on the resume side, you don't have a clue like what that company
no,
needs or what the strategy is or
correct.
what the answer is,
It's
and you're
yeah.
just given this generic resume and this piece of paper to hope that you get shortlisted, you get a call, you can then have that opportunity to have a conversation and have an interview as well. And that's what the product is also getting at and solving, is that it allows the candidate to showcase their skills and have that conversation, even with an LLM and an AI, and
It's
it's a fluid
fascinating when we really
conversation.
understand who they are, but it's evolving. Everyone's seen some of that technology. You look on LinkedIn; it's just popping up everywhere. It's how do we the technology is going to be there. How do we utilize it as humans
Mm,
and just take advantage of that scale so we can get a better outcome? That's what we're trying to drive. Every piece of technology is there to really serve and get better outcomes and evolve the way we do things. So great to see
mm.
you're on a trajectory to change the landscape based on the technology that exists. For you, what's the goal for you? And let's talk about that. What's the vision for Skill Society next 3 to 5 years? Where do you want to be? What's the plan?
For us, well, obviously it's around developing and bringing more than one product and service to market and making sure we can kind of solidify
Yeah,
our landing of the target segment that we're looking at, and then looking at, well, where we're looking at HR as a landscape. We're looking at, well, how can we move down the value chain in terms of, do we start capturing resumes, do we start doing applications, or do we move up the chain as well to move more towards less HR and payroll and things like that, but more around the L&D side, around what problems do existing teams have, and how do existing employees get ranked, and in terms of skills gap and personal
interesting.
development, and then succession plans, and then looking at how, well, this is the team I've got at the moment. Here's the complementary skills or non-complementary skills in some aspects that existing teams have. How does that influence who we should be hiring at the top of the funnel back in? So it's kind of looking at the beginning and the end, and looking where we can move through that value chain. And we really want to build up, use this as, we're not here to replace people's jobs. We're here to optimize and improve productivity of existing roles and buy time back. And for me as a hiring manager, or for the HR team or the TA team, it's optimizing every step of that process to waste less time. It also gives the candidate a good experience in terms of giving them an opportunity to have that conversation and have that initial screening call, and skip an entire step in terms of getting somebody into an interview, reducing that time to hire, automatically speeding up how fast we can deliver, get somebody in that seat and get them onboarded and ramped up. Where we're seeing the business going at the moment is, we're very focused on tech space, design, product management, engineering, because that's what we know. But the conversations we have is around, this would be amazing for hiring a BDM. This would be amazing for hiring an account executive, or operations manager, or office manager. Something simple where the scales, where there's a lot of applicants, and in terms of a lot of work to do. How do you measure one person from another when it's very hard and ambiguous? And I think we really want to build more integrations into existing systems, and then provide our own off the shelf product that you can use without existing ATS integrations as well.
Got it. Yeah, it's a long journey, right? And 8 months in, It's evolving. What have you learnt over the past 8 months? Just obviously you had your hiring challenges. What have you learnt?
Mm.
Because there's always learning, right? We're always evolving. It's never as we start out to be. So what have you learnt? What's different over the past 8 months?
Coming from a tech space and agency world, and it's very different attitudes in terms of hiring and that talent acquisition space. Is the terminology is very different. I think the process of going through and refining and validating problems is pretty much the same across tech or HR. What I've learned is that it requires a certain type of person and a certain set of skills. I sound like Liam Nielsen. To
Love it.
get to that next level. Um, to have the vision, the drive to move forward and keep conquering and understand. There's a problem we're solving in this market, but what I've learned is how we meander our way through that product problem, and how we get runs on the board and validate that. With the economy the way it is at the moment, it's a very much an employer's market, where there's a lot of candidates on the market, a lot of good candidates as well. There's a lot of restructures been happening. There's a lot of people out of jobs. Whereas, there's an influx of resumes and applications for the ones
Which makes
that,
it harder, which is great for the technology that you
correct.
have
Yeah,
right now. You're right.
yeah, exactly.
When you got 500 applications instead of 100, it makes a big difference, doesn't it?
Yeah, and we're trying to solve a problem with a service rather than an additional headcount. So if you already have a TA function or a HR function that's overworked, time poor, this is a perfect product for them to kind of come in and scale their own productivity, so they can, instead of having 10 active roles, which is a lot of work for one person, you could do 30, 40, 50. It just, your world's your oyster, and, having a bit of a wider net to cast, per se, to capture those good quality talent as well. Because, the way it works today is that if you're at the top of the list, you'll get seen. If you're at the bottom, the chances you getting seen or somebody already being hired is pretty high. So it's helping a lot of people there.
No, brilliant. Daniel, thank you for coming on the DevReady podcast today, sharing a bit about your background, what the trajectory of Steel Society is. I'd love to catch up in a year and understand how it's evolved, changed, your thinking, because it will. And we know it will, and you obviously know it will because you've experienced it. But really appreciate you coming in and sharing some of the journey to date. So thank you for your time today.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate your time as well, Andrew. Thank you.
No, cheers, Daniel.